All right, let's dive into this, the two-income trap.
Yeah.
You gave us some excerpts from this book, and we're really looking to unpack it for the listener today.
Yes.
By Elizabeth Warren.
By Elizabeth Warren and Amelia Warren Tyagi.
And Amelia Warren Tyagi.
Her daughter.
Okay, so right off the bat, when you first hear the title, The Two-Income Trap,
yeah,
it seems kind of counterintuitive.
Yeah, it does. Like, especially because
most families would think,
today, yeah.
Oh, two incomes are better than one.
Right.
So how could that be a trap?
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that's what's so brilliant about this book is that it really challenges that notion.
Yeah.
And it digs into all of the sort of hidden costs and complexities that come with that dual income lifestyle.
Okay, so one of the first things that really kind of jumped out at me was this idea of the illusion of affluence.
Yes. Okay.
So, on the surface, it looks like families are doing better than they were, say, a generation ago. But the book argues that that's not necessarily the case.
It's not. And one of the things that they point out is that the average family of four today brings in about 25% more than a similar family in the 1970s.
Wow, okay.
When you adjust for inflation.
So they are making more.
They are making more, but the problem is that their expenses have also increased dramatically.
Okay, so it's not that they're spending more on frivolous things.
No, not necessarily.
It's the cost of...
It's the cost of the essentials that have really gone up.
The basics.
The basics, yeah.
Like
housing.
Housing, yeah.
Childcare.
And those have all risen much faster than wages.
Exactly, yeah. And so what happens is that you end up in this situation where you need two incomes just to afford the basics.
Right, so you're trapped.
Exactly, you're trapped.
In this cycle of needing two incomes.
To just stay afloat. Yeah.
To just survive.
Yeah.
But that leaves you with very little flexibility.
Right, and that's one of the biggest problems is that you have less financial wiggle room, you have less savings, and you're much more vulnerable to unexpected events.
Okay, so let's break down some of these rising costs.
A medical emergency, yeah.
And I know you want to talk about housing.
Yeah.
I think that's a big one for a lot of families today.
It's huge. I mean, it's probably the single biggest expense for most families.
Yeah.
And the book really does a great job of highlighting just how much housing costs have exploded in recent decades.
Yeah, the numbers are kind of alarming.
They are. They're very alarming. They point out that the median home price has surged by 157% since the 1970s.
157%.
57%. Wow. Yeah. Meanwhile, wages have only grown by about 10% during the same period.
So you can see how that gap.
Yeah, you can see how that gap is just getting wider and wider.
Widens so quickly.
Exactly.
And it's interesting because the book points out that it's especially tough for families with kids.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, because they're often competing for homes in those desirable school districts.
Right. The good school districts.
Which further drives up prices.
Okay.
They actually use the term bidding war to describe what's happening in a lot of these markets.
Oh, wow. So can you explain for people who aren't in the real estate world what exactly is a bidding war?
So basically, you have multiple buyers who are all interested in the same house.
Okay.
And they start offering above the asking price.
Right.
Sometimes tens of thousands of dollars more.
Just to outbid each other.
Oh,
wow.
It gets crazy.
So you're already feeling this pressure.
Yeah.
To overextend yourself financially.
You feel like you have to, you have to stretch yourself to the limit just to have a shot at getting the house.
Wow. And I know the book actually highlights a story about a single mother named Gail.
Yes.
Who was struggling with this exact issue.
Yeah, she's working full-time. She's trying to provide for her kids. But she wanted them to be in a good school district.
And so she ends up having to pay a lot more for her house.
Yeah, she ends up in a situation where she's really struggling to keep up with her mortgage payments. Even though she's working full-time.
Even though it's just not enough.
She's doing everything right.
Right.
She's caught in this trap.
Yeah, it's a vicious cycle.
Okay, well, we've talked about housing.
Yeah.
There's another big expense that I think a lot of families.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Feel.
And that's childcare.
Childcare.
I mean, childcare costs have become astronomical in recent years.
Yeah, it's almost like a second mortgage for some families.
It is. It's crazy. And the book actually compares the annual cost of childcare to the cost of sending a child to a 4-year public university.
Really? So you're saying childcare
mind-boggling
could cost as much as sending your kid to college?
In many parts of the country, yes.
That's unbelievable.
It is. It's unbelievable.
And
we're not even talking about like luxury nannies or anything like that.
No,
This is just basic childcare for working families.
Okay, so families are getting hit with this high cost of housing.
Yeah.
This really high cost of childcare.
Absolutely.
And it's no wonder that so many families are just feeling squeezed.
Yeah, I mean, they're feeling the pressure from all sides. It's no wonder they're stressed.
Got to be tough on families.
And, you know, one of the things that the book talks about is that this financial pressure, it doesn't just affect your bank account.
Right,
it affects everything.
Your stress levels.
Your stress levels, your relationship.
Your relationships.
Your ability to spend quality time with your family.
Right, because you're always working.
Exactly. You're always working. You're always worried about money.
You're always stressed out.
And that takes a toll.
Okay, so we've talked about housing. We've talked about childcare. You know, families go through a lot of transitions. And
absolutely.
The book also delves into divorce.
Right.
And I have to say, some of the statistics
were pretty eye-opening.
Divorce can be financially devastating, especially for women and children.
And I think there's this kind of assumption that women today are in a much better position financially than they were maybe a generation ago.
Right.
But the book kind of challenges that.
It does. It challenges that notion. And it shows that post-divorce, women often experience a significant drop in their standard of living.
And what I found particularly interesting was this argument that the rise of the two-income household has in some ways made divorce even more financially risky.
Yeah.
Because now both parents are already stretched so thin that there's just less cushion.
There's no wiggle room
to absorb the added costs of maintaining two separate households.
You're already living paycheck to paycheck.
Exactly.
Now you have to maintain
two households.
Two separate places. It's just...
It's a recipe for disaster.
Unbelievable. Okay.
And that's one of the things that I think is so important about this book is that it really challenges our assumptions.
Yeah.
About
how,
you know, family finances and
money works.
How money works, yeah.
Okay, so we can't really talk about family finances without talking about debt.
Right, the big D word.
Yeah, I mean,
it's everywhere.
It seems like it's everywhere.
And it's not just about overspending anymore.
The book goes into detail about how the credit card industry has transformed.
It has transformed.
Over the years.
Yeah.
So it's not just about people being irresponsible with their spending.
It's more nuanced than that, yeah. The book argues that the deregulation of the credit card industry has led to a proliferation of predatory lending practices.
So even if you're trying to be responsible?
Exactly.
You can still...
We can still fall into a debt trap.
Get caught in that trap.
Yeah.
Because these companies are...
They're targeting consumers with high interest rates, hidden fees.
Yeah, they
making it very easy to get in over your...
They make it easy to get that credit card.
Right.
But then they make it really hard.
Then they slap you with these huge interest rates.
To get out of that debt.
Exactly.
And the book talks about this really kind of shocking story about this family.
The mattress story, yes.
Yeah, tell us about that.
So this family was struggling financially.
Okay.
They had fallen behind on payments for their mattress that they had bought from Sears.
All right.
And Sears was threatening to repossess the mattress.
The used mattress.
A used mattress, yeah.
They were going to repossess.
They were going to come and take it back.
Wow.
Even though this family was clearly struggling. They didn't care. They just wanted their money.
Going to extreme lengths.
Yeah, they were using really aggressive tactics.
To collect this debt.
Just to collect a relatively small debt.
Yeah, even when they were clearly struggling.
It's a really powerful example of how easily families can fall into a debt spiral.
Right.
And how quickly those debts can snowball out of control.
And it's easy to see how all of these things sort of compound on each other.
They're all interconnected.
Yeah, so we've got the high cost of living, the stagnant wages,
the easy access to credit.
And
then you have a system that often seems to be working against families.
That's not really supporting families.
Rather than supporting them.
So it's kind of a bleak picture.
It can feel overwhelming.
Yeah, it can feel overwhelming.
Absolutely.
So where do we go from here?
Well, that's the question.
Is there any hope?
Is there any hope? And that's what we're going to dig into in the next part of our deep dive.
All right, so stay tuned.
We'll be right back.
We'll be right back. Okay, so we've laid out some of the pretty serious challenges families are up against, but I'm curious to explore what the two-income trap suggests as ways forward.
Yeah, it's not all doom and gloom.
Okay.
The book offers some practical advice, and it also delves into some bigger picture solutions.
Okay, well, let's start with the practical stuff.
Right.
What can families do at an individual level to kind of protect themselves?
So one of the key things the book emphasizes is the importance of having a backup plan.
Okay.
So basically, it's about anticipating those potential financial shocks.
Okay.
And having a strategy in place to navigate them.
Like what kinds of shocks?
Well, imagine a scenario where one parent loses their job.
Okay. Yeah, that happens.
Happens all the time, right? So the book suggests families ask themselves, could we downsize our housing?
Okay.
Could we cut back on certain expenses? Or maybe dip into savings to bridge the gap?
So it's about being proactive.
Exactly.
Rather than reactive.
Yeah.
Okay, I like that.
Have a plan in place before the storm hits.
And that brings us to one of the book's really key recommendations, the emergency fund.
Yes, the emergency fund. So important.
Right. We've all heard about this.
Everybody needs one.
But it's easier said than done sometimes.
Oh, God. Yeah, but it's crucial. I mean, think of it as your financial shock absorber, right? Having 3 to 6 months of living expenses set aside can make all the difference when facing unexpected challenges.
Oh, 3 to 6 months. That seems like a lot.
It can seem daunting, but it's really about taking a step-by-step approach.
All right, break it down for us.
So start by setting a small, achievable savings goal each month.
Okay.
Even if it's just $50 or $100.
Right.
Something is better than nothing.
Right. Every little bit adds up.
Exactly. And then gradually increase that amount as you're able to.
Okay, so it's about building that habit.
Yes. Building the habit of saving.
Being consistent.
And being consistent, yeah.
Okay, so we talked about saving.
Yeah.
But a lot of people are already struggling to make ends meet.
Absolutely.
So how do you even find the money to save?
That's a great question. And the book offers some really practical tips for that.
Okay.
So it starts with taking a hard look at your spending habits.
All right, so track where it's all going.
Exactly. Track your expenses.
Okay.
Create a detailed budget. And really make conscious choices about where your money's going.
It's kind of like doing a little financial surgery.
Yes, exactly. You're dissecting your spending habits.
Looking for those problem areas.
Identify those hidden hemorrhages that are draining your resources.
Right, and it doesn't have to be about depriving yourself.
It's not about deprivation. It's about making informed and empowered decisions about your finances.
Right. Maybe cutting back on that daily latte.
Exactly. Little things like that can make a big difference over time.
Little things add up.
Yeah. So maybe brewing your coffee at home instead of buying it every day.
Packing your lunch.
Packing your lunch.
Instead of
eating out.
Going out to eat.
Finding more affordable entertainment options.
Yeah. Right.
All of those things can add up.
Okay. So we've talked about saving. We've talked about cutting back. The book also cautions against falling into the debt trap.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
It seems like so many people are relying on credit cards just to cover
it's a slippery
those basic expenses.
Yeah, and it's easy to get in over your head.
And then you're paying those high interest rates.
Exactly, and it's just a vicious cycle.
Right. Okay. So we've talked about what families can do individually. But I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on some of those bigger picture solutions that the book talks about.
The policy changes.
The policy changes that could really address these issues.
So the book advocates for a multi-pronged approach.
Okay.
And one of the key areas it focuses on is boosting income for lower income families.
So are we talking about things like raising the minimum wage?
That's one of the solutions they explore,
And that's a
hot button issue.
Yeah, there's definitely different perspectives on that.
Absolutely. Some people argue that it could lead to job losses.
Right.
While others say it's essential to ensure a living wage.
How do we
for all workers
navigate that?
Yeah, it's a complex issue.
Yeah.
And the book acknowledges that there are valid arguments on both sides.
Okay.
It doesn't pretend to have all the answers.
Right.
But it encourages readers to engage in those debates.
Right.
To really look at the evidence.
To have those discussions.
Yeah. And to consider the potential consequences of different policy choices.
So let's have that conversation.
Yes, let's have a real conversation.
Okay, so we've talked about wages. I want to circle back to childcare.
Oh, childcare, yeah.
Because
it's a huge problem.
It is a huge expense.
Families.
And is there anything we can do on a policy level to make that more affordable?
So the book suggests exploring things like government subsidies or tax breaks to help offset those costs for families.
Okay.
It makes the argument that investing in affordable, high-quality childcare isn't just good for families. It's good for the economy as a whole.
It's an investment.
It is an investment.
In the future.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
Right. I mean, we invest so much in education once kids reach school age.
Right.
But maybe we need to start thinking about affordable childcare as an investment in early childhood development.
And high quality.
Yes.
Early childhood education.
Can have a ripple effect.
Really set kids up for success.
Benefits children throughout their lives.
Okay, and while we're on the topic of investments,
yeah,
we can't forget about healthcare.
Oh, absolutely. Healthcare, that's another huge one.
That's a major source of stress for families.
Financial instability.
Financial instability.
Medical bills can bankrupt families.
It's scary.
It is scary. It's a huge problem.
Okay, so what does the book say?
So the book underscores the need for policies that make healthcare more accessible.
Okay.
And affordable for all families.
Okay.
Regardless of their income or employment status.
It shouldn't be a luxury.
It should be a fundamental right.
Everyone should have access to quality healthcare.
You know, it's interesting because it seems like so many of these issues...
They're all interconnected.
They're all...
You can't separate them.
Interconnected.
Yeah, affordable housing, childcare, healthcare.
Yeah.
They all play a crucial role in a family's well-being.
It's not just about individual choices.
Exactly. It's not just about individual choices. It's about a system.
It's about the system.
That can either support families or create barriers to their success.
Right. So how do we change the system?
Well, that's the challenge, right? And I think the two-income trap really highlights the need for a fundamental shift in thinking.
Okay.
We need to move away from this individualistic bootstrap mentality that often blames families for their struggles.
Like they're not trying hard enough?
Exactly. It's not about that.
Okay.
It's about recognizing that systemic factors play a huge role in shaping those outcomes.
Right. We need to create a system that gives everybody a fair shot. Absolutely. And that's going to require some honest conversations about our values as a society.
About our priorities as a society.
What we prioritize, how we allocate our resources.
It's a big task.
It is a big task.
But I have to say, this book has really...
It's thought-provoking.
Made me think about these issues in a new way.
It challenges you to see things differently.
Yeah. And it's given me a sense of hope.
Good. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
Because it's not meant to be a depressing book.
No.
It's meant to be a call to action.
Okay.
It's meant to spark those conversations.
Okay.
And to empower people to demand better.
So it's not just a book about problems.
No, it's a book about possibilities.
Like about what we can do to make things better.
Exactly.
Okay. Well, I like that.
Yeah, it's about creating a future.
Yeah.
Where families are supported.
Where they have those opportunities.
Where they have the resources they need to thrive.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
What would you say is the main takeaway for our listener?
I would say the main takeaway is that we need to shift our thinking about family finances.
Okay.
It's not just about individual responsibility.
Right.
It's about creating a system that supports families.
That works for everyone.
That works for everyone, yeah.
Okay.
And that's going to require us to be more aware of the challenges, to be more engaged in the conversation.
To advocate for change.
And to advocate for change.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So we've spent all this time talking about the problems, the traps, the struggles families face.
Mm-hmm.
But you left us hanging at the end of the last part with this question of like, okay, if the classic American dream, you know, the house, the cars, 2.5 kids, if all of that's becoming so difficult, unsustainable for so many, what does the future look like?
Well, that's a big question. And the book doesn't necessarily have all the answers, but it does challenge us to think differently about what that American dream could or should be.
So are we talking about like a complete
I think so, yeah.
redefinition?
It's about reevaluating our priorities.
Okay.
What really matters.
So not necessarily giving up on wanting a good life.
No, not at all.
But more about what defines that good life.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's about moving beyond that consumerist mindset.
The bigger house, the better car.
Right. More stuff doesn't necessarily equal more happiness.
Okay, so what does the book suggest?
Well, it points towards a more holistic view of success.
Okay.
One that prioritizes financial security, of course.
Sure.
But also things like time with loved ones.
Okay.
Access to quality health care, education.
Yeah.
A sense of community.
Those things that really matter.
Exactly.
Okay, so this sounds great in theory.
Yeah.
But are there any real-world examples?
There are.
Yeah.
There are actually, yeah. I mean, all over the world, you see these pockets of innovation where communities are experimenting with different ways of living.
Like what?
Well, some communities are exploring co-housing models as a way to address the affordability crisis.
Interesting.
Others are creating worker-owned cooperatives that prioritize employee well-being and shared profits.
So they're really trying to...
But they're thinking outside the box.
Yeah, come up with these creative solutions.
Exactly.
Okay, and I'm also curious.
Yeah.
On the policy side,
right.
Are there any countries that are...
There are, yeah.
Really implementing policies that...
It's working, yeah.
Support families?
So some Scandinavian countries have really robust social safety nets. Universal health care, affordable child care, generous parental leave policies.
So they're really prioritizing families.
They are.
It seems like.
And it's paying off.
We're taking a much more holistic approach.
They are. They're addressing the root causes.
Than we are here.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot we can learn from them.
It's kind of sad that...
It is. We adopted some of those policies.
Really figured that out yet.
Yeah. And the book does critique some of the policies and priorities that have led to the current situation here.
Right. It's calling for us to kind of shift our thinking.
Yeah. A major shift.
Away from this idea that people should just pull themselves up by their bootstraps.
Right, that it's all about individual responsibility.
When it's really not that simple.
It's much more complex than that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we have to recognize those systemic factors.
Yeah, the systems we've created have a huge impact on people's lives.
And how do we start to change those systems?
Well, I think awareness is the first step.
Okay.
Books like The Two-Income Trap are so important.
Yeah.
Because they spark those conversations.
They make us think about...
They challenge the status quo.
These things.
Yeah. And they empower us to imagine something different.
Okay, so what can our listeners do
right.
armed with this knowledge?
Well, I think the first thing is to stay engaged. Keep reading, keep learning, keep questioning. Talk to your friends and family.
Have these conversations.
Yeah. Advocate for policies that support families.
Use your voice.
Use your voice. Vote.
Make a difference.
Exactly. Change happens from the ground up.
Well, this has been a fascinating deep dive.
It has.
We've explored some really challenging issues.
We have.
But I think we've also come away with...
some hope.
Some hope, some solutions, some ideas.
And a lot to think about.
Yeah. So thank you for joining us.
Yes, thank you.
On this journey into the two-income trap.
And keep fighting the good fight.
Keep learning. Keep questioning.
And keep pushing for a better world.
Yeah.